Hi, I'm Stephen Tryon. The purpose of accountability citizenship, and you know this part, so say it with me, is to build and sustain a community of positive, informed, and engaged citizens. I wanted to talk tonight about the shutdown of the government and this whole drama that's been playing out over the last little bit here in the news cycle. We've seen this before, and the same thing is happening now. You've got Democrats saying it's the Republicans, Republicans saying it's the Democrats, and we, the people, are left sort of trying to figure that out. And I wanted to weigh in a little bit because I've actually written a bit about how you tell whether something is true or not true. I mean, that's really the whole project of accountability citizenship, is to give citizens the tools they need to process information when it comes at them fast and furious. In fact, in this book, which is my third book, I talk about truth a lot. And I talk about the two historical standards for truth. And one of those is correspondence, whether you can tell whether something corresponds to a fact in the real world. And then the other is coherence. And correspondence, of course, gets a little tricky when one side is saying the sky is blue and the other side is saying the sky is red. Who knows, right? Well, actually, when you apply the standard of coherence, in this case anyways, I think the answer becomes quite clear. And my argument to you is that I think the Democrats are right and the Republicans are wrong, and the Republicans should compromise in order to get this continuing resolution passed and to avoid the government shutdown. If the shutdown happens, and I don't know the results of the meeting with the president, but if the shutdown happens, in my view, it's the Republicans' fault this time. And I'll explain why here in a minute. Besides the fact that Republicans control the House, Republicans control the Senate, Republicans are in the White House, and the Supreme Court seems willing to do whatever the president wants them to do. So all of the steering wheels of the government, if you will, are in the hands of the Republican Party. Besides that, there's a historical pattern over the last 15 years of the Republicans applying sort of strategic obstruction and a ruthless unilateral application of power when they have it, when they're in a position of power. And the Democrats, on the other hand, have sort of fumbled along and they've been guilty of some naivete, I think, in their dealings with the Republicans. And so they've appeared hapless, and their PR has suffered, their brand has suffered as a result of this combination of events. Just a little bit about myself. You know, I was a Republican for most of my adult life, to be honest, until about 20 years ago. And I then became unaffiliated. And if you read this book, my first book, The Toolkit for Information Age Citizenship, you'll see that I say basically the political parties are necessary evils. I'm not a fanatic about either party. I do believe the Democratic Party is the party that is currently the party that is defending our republic as we know it. The Republican Party, on the other hand, has been captured. I think it has metastasized, and it's been captured by a white nationalist faction that is really extreme, and it's really driving us in some directions that I don't think any of us, or most of us, want to go. So back to this pattern that I'm alleging, a pattern of strategic obstruction and the ruthless application of power that I say has been going on for about 15 years at least. Let me just give you a few examples. The clearest example, going back a few years, is at the very end of the Obama administration, when Justice Scalia died on the Supreme Court. So there's a vacancy on the Supreme Court. We had a Democratic president. The Democratic president put forward a nominee. And this all happened 8 months before the election. Justice Scalia died in February of 2016. President Obama put forward Merrick Garland as his nominee on March 16th of 2016. The election wasn't until November. But the Republican leader of the Senate, McConnell, said, oh no, there's an election coming in just a few months. We're going to wait and see who wins the election, and then we'll decide based on that when and how we proceed with filling that vacancy on the Supreme Court. Of course, Trump won the 2016 election, and leader of the Senate waited until he was president, and he got to pick a conservative justice to fill that seat. So by that rule, I mean, which was unprecedented at the time, that we're going to leave a Supreme Court seat vacant for 8 months, longer than that, almost a year, when you count time after the election until we had the Republican in office. When you think about that as the rule that McConnell put in place, you think, well, okay. But then just 4 years later, a similar situation occurred while President Trump was president, at the very end of President Trump's first term. Ruth Bader Ginsburg died on September 18th of 2020. And of course, the election was going to be in November. And you would think that, well, by McConnell's standard, that we would wait until after the election. But no. Trump nominated Amy Coney Barrett on September 26th, 8 days after Ruth Bader Ginsburg died. And the Republican-controlled Senate confirmed Amy Coney Barrett in October of 2020, a month before the election. So all that happened within a period of basically 2 months before the election. Completely the opposite rule of what McConnell had done when Obama was president. Very clear, very ruthless application of political power to ensure that both seats went to conservative justices, as opposed to sort of a more even-handed approach that has, that's been generally the way Congress has worked, is that they establish rules in recognition of the fact that either party could be in control at a different time. But that's not the way the Republicans have been operating. Now, if you fast forward just to this budget cycle and this whole continuing resolution kerfuffle that's been going on here, right? In March, we had an impending budget problem, and the Democrats conceded. The Democrats went along with the Republican plan. They said, okay, we don't want to shut the government down. We'll give you the votes, and we passed a continuing resolution. That was just in March of this year, okay? And then the Republicans proceeded to ram the big, beautiful bill through on a partisan vote, okay? A partisan vote. I think 5 Democrats voted for it, 5 Republicans voted against it, but by and large, it was all Republicans that got that done. And the Democrats were completely excluded from input on that. And that budget, by the way, incorporated a huge lie to the American people. The fact of the matter is, the Republicans passed a bill that increased the debt by about $5 trillion over the 10-year program cycle. And they hid that from the American people by inventing a made-up baseline. Again, completely going against precedent in the same way that McConnell had gone against precedent when he made this, we're going to wait for the election before we consider a replacement for Justice Scalia in the 2016 cycle. So now here we are, and it's September, the end of September, and we're coming up to another looming deadline. And the Republicans are saying, oh, it's the Democrats withholding their votes. And I'm saying not so fast. It's pretty clear to me that based on coherence, the pattern that I have seen the Republicans apply over the past 15 years, the Democrats should get the concession in order to sign on to this continuing resolution. And if the Republicans insist that they're not going to give them one of their top priorities, then I think the shutdown is entirely the fault of the Republicans, because that's unreasonable. It's not the way our government works. This is not the republic of the Republicans. It's not the republic of the Democrats. It's the republic of all of us together. And we need to have, as I've argued in this book, the thesis of this book is that our political culture needs to be one that's rooted in intellectual humility, tolerance in pursuit of the truth, the spirit of compromise. And clearly the Republicans are mostly going to get their way here with this process because they control the government. They control all of the houses of Congress, and they control the presidency. But what the Democrats are asking for, some concessions on provisions that will make healthcare more affordable for the average American, those seem very reasonable to me. Continuing the Affordable Care Act subsidies on healthcare will make healthcare more affordable, or will keep healthcare at an affordable level, will prevent premiums from going up. That all seems pretty reasonable to me, and it seems like something that the Republicans should accede to. And if they don't, and if they shut down the government, and if Trump goes through on his threat and to fire boatloads of government workers, and make no mistake, if you watch the news cycle what he's done is he's threatened to tie firing government employees to whether or not the Democrats sign on to this continuing resolution. That's an attempt to intimidate the Democrats, holding over their head something that Senator Schumer said in March when he conceded. He said, we don't want all of these government workers to lose their jobs. And that was the threat at that time as well. So the president has revisited that threat, and he's brought that back on the table in advance of this conversation that they had today, or that they're having today. And so it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. But if the government shuts down, accountabilitycitizenship.org says, based on what I've observed over the past 15 years, and the theory of coherence being a sound basis for truth, the Republicans are responsible, and we should hold the Republicans responsible. We should hold the Republicans responsible for the budget that they passed, because not only does it drive up the debt, but they lied to the American people in order to do it. They created a made-up baseline that completely violates the precedent of the last 50 years since the Congressional Budget Act was passed in order to get that budget passed. And this continuing resolution is just the next little battle in this ongoing saga of what the Republicans are doing with the budget, which is not good for our country. Okay, so there you have it. I hope the government doesn't shut down. I hope they find a way to compromise and to get us to a better place. Thanks for watching. Bye now.